question to that, to what extent will you destroy either the brake pads from the friction if you are braking under full power?
Hard enough, you won't really harm them at all. If you don't press hard enough and you kind of just drag the brakes, it's kind of tantamount to coasting down a steep grade, riding the brakes. You'll heat them up over time. And that's probably what we've seen in some of these cases.
And heated brakes would deplete the performance?
Yes. So it's a question of you can do it, but at the same time there are reasons why it may not happen.
Real quick, you want to add?
Well, the situation is you have to get into the brake pedal. You have to do that. And I have conducted a lot of, like I said, high-performance driving clinics, as I think some other people have done. Dan has done, a lot of other people, Danny McKeever, and we've done this. And people have this reluctance to get into the brake pedal. And if you take people and put them in the car and you say, okay, what I want you to do is go up to about 45, 50 miles an hour and then hit the brakes as hard as you can, what they will do is they will look at you and they'll say, oh, really? Won't I break something? Won't it flip? Won't it roll? Won't it go out of control? And say, no, it'll be okay as hard as you can. And so then you finally talk them into this. And what you'll get from them is about a 50% effort. And if they hit the brake hard enough to where they initiate analog brakes, they'll feel the chattering of the system, and they get off the brake because they think they've broken something. And that's what you get from the vast majority of people. And so when people say they were stepping on the brakes as hard as they can, they really weren't, because they're reluctant to do that. And that gets into human factors and stuff like that. But that's God's truth as to what really happens when you get people into those kinds of situations.
Okay. What's that?
Are you talking about this situation where the vacuum system shuts off?
The engines just don't make a lot of vacuum wide open throttle.
So would a person who maybe weighs 90 pounds and doesn't have a lot of physical strength, would they still be able?
Would a small person or a youngster still have the force to put the brakes on?
I don't have the actual data to answer that question. Maybe our guest from UCLA knows something about how many pounds of force a person can exert. But my sense is that that person may not push hard enough. They may be capable of doing it, but they may not, because they're just not using the right 2 feet or whatever they're doing.
Well, I can see the discussion has begun. Okay, okay, quick time out. Wait, we'll get to you.
While this is going on, you still have to explain how you got to full throttle if you weren't pressing on the accelerator. So you can't look at that in isolation. If the throttle is open, you need to answer that question before you even worry about how effective your brakes are. But in my experience, the brakes always will stop.
Okay, we'll get to how it got to full throttle real quick. Let's go through some patients here. Alicia?
So I've read in at least one of the Toyota incidences, they said she wasn't applying the brakes fully, so that we can see. I mean, when they look at the car, you can tell if the brakes were really slammed on or if people were only applying 50%.
That's not true.
So here's our first question. Again, just not a truism, that we can't tell always how much brake force there is?
That's right. Because let's say we start the event with a properly functioning brake system on the car.
Let's do something like
make that assumption.
truisms,
So
and
the
maybe
brakes are
you
good.
can just start another one that says,
and let's say that for some reason,
so maybe that's
and I agree with John, you have to ask why they got to wide open throttle. Let's say it happens. And let's say this person hits the brakes hard enough to stop the car the first time. What you will get is a hard event, but of a very short duration. So you will get only minimal brake wear because you get the car stopped. But if you get to the vehicle after some event like this bozo in San Diego,
it's not characterized.
I take that back. If you get to that event, but if you get to that event, and after that event, the front brake pads were worn completely off. It was down to the backing plate material. That happened because he was on the brakes for a long, long, long time, but without stepping on it hard enough to stop the car. So when you get to an event where you have the brake pads worn off, that is proof that the brake system was functioning correctly, or else that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Let me just make it, and we'll come right to you. Again, we don't want to characterize anyone here. We're not trying to pick. I know. But yeah, obviously there's strong opinions here, but hopefully at the end of the day, we're all asking questions that we thought of or we didn't know the answers, and if we can come up with some truisms that we agree, and maybe we put it out to the industry and to each of the manufacturers and say, is it true that each of your cars manufactured can be stopped? I mean, because that's what we seem to think, or a majority of us seem to think, and then verify that.
Excuse me. I think one thing I've noticed from reading the raw complaints in the NHTSA database, and I've read thousands of them, is that a lot of people, when they're faced with this situation, they're not actually trying to stop. They're trying to use the brake pedal to just maintain speed while they figure out what's going on. Their first instinct isn't, I gotta stop. Their first thing is, this thing's going faster than I want, I better slow it down. Or I better try to keep down to a reasonable speed and I'll figure out what's going on. And meanwhile, they're just heating up the brakes, and then when they finally realize they have to stop, they've already overheated. So there's an issue of, you have to recognize pretty quickly that stopping is what you need to do, and then execute that.
Okay.
I don't think people actually go through that thought process that quickly.
Okay, we'll get to that. You had a quick question.
To go along with the 90 pounds, like how someone is a lightweight, I read Professor Schmidt's article. Could that be a reason why older people or people of shorter stature, people's speed, that could be a factor into why they won't push all the way down?
No. Older people have higher rates of incidents for the same reason that beginning drivers do. They make more mistakes.
Okay.
Shifting.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just one second.
I'd add one other thing to this equation, too. We spent billions of dollars to make cars safer, but we haven't spent one nickel to improve the driver. And
Okay.
Yes.
When you think about ABS as a perfect example, I tell people, it's only somewhat facetiously, that the only thing that happens good from the typical person getting into an ABS situation is that they come out of it with a car that's gone straight into whatever in front of them, but they don't have flat spotted tires. That's a sad commentary on how people understand that technology, which is a fairly basic technology we've had for 30 years now. It's because that's endangering people and lives. You need to have an off-road situation someplace where you can actually teach people how to drive properly. And that's what we don't do.
Okay, so let's go back to the discussion here. So we had this kind of discussion begun by John about sudden acceleration, unintended acceleration, different terms sometimes intermix. So let's go to the reasons are, and some of the people, we've already addressed that perhaps the reason that the throttle's wide open is because your foot's on it. But as Dan just mentioned, perhaps it's wide open for other reasons. And again, one of the reasons out there is because electronic throttles now could be affected by electromagnetic interference or outside forces or errors within software or system. So I'd like to turn it over. Bill, the reason you're here is just to go over electronic systems. Bill is obviously with Toyota. They've gone over this. We're asked for a demonstration of the system just as a backgrounder. It's not supposed to be Toyota-esque, but obviously it will be. So let's get a background and go from there.
Really in the context of how automotive electronic control systems work. Obviously, we're going to show you the Toyota system because that's the system we know best. Actually, we were out earlier in the parking lot taking Mike Michael's car apart, and hopefully we'll be able to get all these pieces back in. But these are actually the components of an electronic control system, as we would have installed on a late model Camry, for example. So let's see if we can get this to work. Usually if you take the cap off, you get a better picture. So we like that. Let's see, we've got this plugged in. Oh, that's a happy sound, we like that. Okay, well, so let's get going then. With the proper one.
So again, while you're setting up, I think we have another truism. I mean, all manufacturers have electronic throttle control, is that correct? Are there any makes and models on the road today to that that doesn't have electronic throttle control?
So fly-by-wire?
Yeah, I mean, does anybody have cable still going to?
Yeah,
right. I mean, new cars being sold today. And how long has it been available?
Well, from Toyota, we started putting electronic throttle controls on our vehicles in 1998.